definitely needed. You had mentioned earlier that while we were doing the physical exam that you also had some concerns just about feeding because this is your first child, which I 100% understand. Those little babies don't come with a handbook. So, well, you definitely got a chance to talk about that today if it's something that you're concerned with. As far as feeding, we typically ask whether or not you're going to be breastfeeding or formula feeding, or if you had a preference overall.
I was planning on breastfeeding, but I wanted to get your opinion on breastfeeding versus formula feeding.
Absolutely. Breastfeeding is a great option. The thing we often say in pediatrics is fed baby is happy baby, and that's what our main focus is. I can absolutely talk about some differences there and kind of let you make your choice there. But if you're sticking with breastfeeding, I strongly encourage that, and we support you with that. So some big benefits to breastfeeding. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is cost. With formula feeding, you're going to be putting out a lot of money buying formula tins, especially as little baby John Doe grows up, starts getting more of an appetite, starts eating more. Obviously, that can be something that's somewhat hard to keep up with, whereas breastfeeding, of course, there's no cost there. One of the other big benefits that we really like with breastfeeding, of course, is the immune boosting effects of breast milk, especially within the first 6 months. There's a lot of transfer of your natural antibodies that go into baby via the breastfeeding method, and it's something that we really, really like about breastfeeding, again, along with the convenience of cost. Some of the only, not really downsides, but things that we try to be aware of with breastfeeding is breast milk's not always fortified with all the necessary vitamins and nutrients, so especially like vitamin D is not present in the breast milk, but that's something that we can supplement outside of the breast milk, so that's not going to be a hindrance if that's what you'd like to choose. Formula feeding is really convenient in its own right because, of course, you don't have to produce, you don't have to worry about any of the side effects or what your production status is, but if you feel comfortable with that, that doesn't have to necessarily be a concern if it isn't for you. The other upside with formula is that you can measure it exactly. You know how much you're feeding the baby. It's fortified. It's got all the necessary vitamins and nutrients because it's been fortified artificially. But again, talking about what we did earlier, the downside of it's really just the cost of purchasing the formula tins super frequently. So if it's okay with you, and based on what you were telling me, do you feel like breastfeeding or formula feeding is your preference?
Well, I think breastfeeding, but how often should I be feeding every day?
Breastfeeding is a great option. Like I said, I'm more than happy to support you on that. So as far as breastfeeding, within the first 2 months, you'll probably be nursing on one side or both sides, whatever baby's preference seems to be and whatever your preference is, at least every 2 to 3 hours, including through the night. So at this stage, we're expecting baby little John Doe to sleep in kind of these 2 to 3 hour intervals. So it usually makes it pretty easy because when he's awake, he's hungry and he's going to tell you. But sometimes if he gets a little sleepy or something like that, just keeping up with it every 2 to 3 hours is kind of the recommended interval of feeding with breastfeeding. After 2 months, that'll reduce a little bit. From 2 to 6 months, typically it goes down just a little bit. So every 3 to 4 hours instead of every 2 to 3 hours, you'll be nursing, again, one side or both sides, whatever your preference is there. And again, if there's any concerns with it, either breast or just any worries come up about that, we're always here for you. If you want to follow up, we're happy to talk about that. The intervals would go up if you wanted to continue past 6 months. At this point, we'd also start looking at some other foods besides breast milk or formula. But if you're sticking with the breastfeeding, that would go kind of every 4 hours after 6 months with feeding intervals. And again, at this point, we would probably also be trying some other foods that aren't breast milk or formula, which we can also talk about here in a second.
So when can I start doing that? When can I start feeding my babies like solid foods?
So solid foods, we typically wait until baby John Doe turns about 6 months old. That's when we would start introducing things like purees that are vegetable or fruit-based. You could also do little small bite-sized pieces of meats, beans, vegetables. At this age, by 6 months, they should have pretty good head and neck control, meaning that there's a lower risk of them choking on those foods. But again, these will be really small intervals. I mean, of each of these, like the pureed veggies, fruits, meats, it'd be about 3 to 4 tablespoons every day, in addition to the breast milk or formula that you'd be choosing. But again, based on your preference with the breastfeeding, we would be doing the every 4 hour interval of breastfeeding, along with about 3 to 4 tablespoons of each serving of meats, fruits, vegetables, things like that.
So is there anything my baby should not be eating?
One of the big things we just generally don't recommend is cow's milk. There's a big risk with cow's milk of if you overconsume it, it can lead to iron deficiency, especially the early development period. Baby's GI tract is still forming. It can cause a decrease in the amount that baby can absorb iron, especially from breast milk or from other foods. So typically we wait until they're at least a year old before we start intaking cow's milk in any amount. And then when we hit that 1 year mark, we can kind of discuss how much he should be intaking every day just to be safe.
So I was on Facebook and I saw that honey was maybe a good immune booster for children. Is that true?
I'm not against honey. However, at this age, we generally don't recommend it within the first year. I've seen that too. A lot of people will be like, honey, especially raw honey, has these natural antibodies and kind of antibacterial properties to it. And that is generally true for adults and older children that can tolerate it. But within the first year of life, baby John Doe is still developing his immune system. And we kind of want to let him do that first before consuming any honey. One of the things you might have seen in the news with honey is a lot of children under the year of 1 age can develop botulism from honey, whether it's raw or just like stuff that's on the shelf, because it's a really sugary substance where that bacteria can thrive. So we typically try and give them at least a year before starting them on any sort of honey. Same to the cow's milk, there's just some risk there. So we generally try and stay away from it within the first year.
Oh, okay.
Is there any other questions, concerns you have concerning feeding?
No, I don't think so. I think you've answered them well.
Okay. And of course, there's some other things to get to, but yeah, as far as feeding, that seems to be pretty good. Does that sound like a plan for you?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.